My name is Serena, and I'm 43 years old, and I'll never forget the day my daughter brought home the man who called me a nobody. I still remember the smell of roasted chicken filling my tiny kitchen that evening. The hum of the old ceiling fan did little to drown out my excitement. My daughter, Isabel, was coming home for dinner and she was bringing someone special. After years of watching her grow from a curious little girl into a confident young woman, the thought of meeting her fiancé filled me with both pride and nerves. I had spent the entire afternoon cleaning, cooking, and fussing over every detail of our modest home, determined to make everything perfect. I've lived a simple life as a nurse in a small town. After my husband passed away when Isabel was only 10, I had to raise her alone. I never remarried. Never even thought about it. My focus was on keeping her safe, educated, and loved. Every shift I worked, every extra hour I stayed, it was all for her. I didn't have much, but I had enough. And that night, I hoped she'd see how far we'd come together. When the doorbell rang, I wiped my hands on my apron and smiled. Isabel walked in first, glowing in a light blue dress, her hair tucked neatly behind her ears. Beside her stood a tall young man with perfectly styled hair and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. His name was Adrian. I could tell, even before he opened his mouth, that he came from money. "Mom, this is Adrian," Isabel said, her voice beaming with pride. "Adrian, this is my mother, Serena." He gave me a quick once over, the kind of glance that weighed and judged in a single heartbeat. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hayes," he said, his tone polite but cold. "Please, call me Serena," I replied warmly. "I'm so happy you're here. I hope you're hungry." Dinner started pleasantly enough. I asked about his work, his family, the usual things. He spoke about his father's business empire, the companies he'd soon inherit, and the luxurious trips they often took. Isabel looked at him like he hung the stars. I kept smiling, but I could feel the unspoken divide between us, the way he glanced at the worn tablecloth or the chipped edges of the dinner plates. At one point, he commented, "You've done a lot with what you have here. It's cozy." The pause before "what you have" cut deeper than it should have. I brushed it off, saying, "Thank you, I do my best." He chuckled, swirling his wineglass. "I suppose it takes all kinds of people to make the world go round, even those who choose simpler paths." My stomach tightened, but I said nothing. Isabel laughed lightly, oblivious to the undertone. When I mentioned how proud I was of her earning her degree, Adrian leaned back and said, "Well, she won't have to work much longer. Once we're married, I'll make sure she's taken care of. No more scraping by." The words hung heavy between us. I noticed Isabel blush, but she smiled at him anyway, as if he were promising her the world. I smiled too, though mine felt frozen in place. My daughter deserved love, not condescension. But I held my tongue, choosing peace over pride. After dinner, I offered dessert, a homemade pie that had always been Isabel's favorite. Adrian declined, saying he didn't usually eat sweets. The way he said it made me feel foolish for even offering. Isabel apologized on his behalf, which somehow made it worse. When they left, I stood by the door watching them walk to his sleek black car. His hand rested on Isabel's back, possessive and firm. My heart ached with worry I couldn't yet name. The next morning, Isabel texted me, "He really liked you, Mom. I think it went great." I smiled at the message, even though my gut told me otherwise. That's when I remembered the last thing Adrian said before leaving. He had looked around my small living room, then smirked slightly and muttered, "You know, Isabel, I guess everyone has to start somewhere, even nobodies." He said it quietly, maybe thinking I hadn't heard. But I did, every word. But the moment Adrian smirked and called me a nobody, I realized this dinner would change everything. I froze in disbelief. The word nobody ringing in my ears like an insult I hadn't heard in decades. It's strange how one word, a single, careless insult, can slice through years of strength you've carefully built. Nobody. I stood there by the sink, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the room, my hands still wet from rinsing the dishes. I wanted to believe I'd misheard him, that I'd imagined it, but deep down I knew I hadn't. I'd heard that tone before, the smug arrogance of people who believed kindness was weakness. I kept thinking of Isabel's bright smile as she hugged me goodbye. She hadn't caught the remark. Her heart was too pure, too in love to see the contempt hiding behind his charm. I wiped my hands, took a deep breath, and forced myself to move on with my evening. I wasn't going to let a man like that steal my peace. Still, when I finally sat on the couch, a wave of old memories washed over me. Years ago, before Isabel was even born, I'd been treated the same way by my late husband's family. They came from money, not immense wealth, but enough to think they were better than me. His mother never hid her disapproval, calling me unfit to marry her son because I came from a working-class family. When he died, that side of the family vanished, as if we'd never existed. I'd learned to hold my head high, to raise my daughter without shame, but Adrian's words reopened that wound like it had never healed. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept seeing his face, that smug little smirk when he said it. I wanted to call Isabel, to tell her what kind of man she was marrying, but I stopped myself. She loved him. And I didn't want to be the mother who ruined her happiness. I needed to be patient, to let her see the truth on her own. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the kitchen window, I brewed coffee and tried to convince myself that maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe he'd had too much wine. Maybe he didn't mean it that way. But when I looked in the mirror, the reflection staring back at me didn't believe a word of it. Later that day, Isabel called. Her voice was cheerful, bubbly as ever. "Mom, last night was amazing. Adrian said he enjoyed dinner. You really made a great impression." I forced a smile she couldn't see. "I'm glad, sweetheart. He seems confident." She giggled. "That's one way to put it. But he's a good man, Mom. Just different. His family's a bit formal, so he can come off a little strong." I didn't respond immediately. "As long as he treats you right, Isabel, that's all that matters to me." She paused. "He does, Mom. He really does." We talked a bit more about her wedding plans, the venue she dreamed of, the dress she'd been saving for. I listened quietly, proud but uneasy. After we hung up, I sat alone in silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that this story was far from over. Adrian wasn't just arrogant. There was something deeper in him, a kind of disdain for people like me. People who worked hard, who didn't measure success in dollars or last names. Later that week, I saw them again when Isabel dropped by to pick up a few things. Adrian stayed in the car, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up when I waved from the porch. Isabel apologized, saying he was stressed from work. I told her it was fine, but my heart whispered otherwise. That night, I took out an old box from my closet, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were faded photographs from my college days. Moments frozen in time. One photo in particular caught my eye, me and a young man smiling at a campus fair. His arm was around me, his face filled with warmth. Gregory. My first love. The man I hadn't seen since he left me to marry into money. I traced his face with my finger, wondering where he was now, what kind of life he'd built. I never imagined, not in my wildest thoughts, that our paths would cross again. Little did he know, his arrogance would crumble the moment his father saw my face. The next morning, Isabel told me Adrian's family wanted to invite us to dinner at their mansion. I remember pausing mid-sip of my coffee, the spoon clinking gently against the cup. A dinner invitation? I wasn't sure if I should be flattered or nervous. It wasn't often that people like Adrian's family wanted anything to do with people like me. Isabel was radiant as she explained, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mom, this is a big deal. His parents really want to meet you." Adrian said, his father especially is looking forward to it. I tried to hide my apprehension behind a soft smile. "That's kind of them. When is it?" "This Saturday evening," she said. "They're having a formal dinner, nothing crazy, just family." Family. The word hit me differently. I hadn't been part of a real family gathering in years. Still, I wanted to make a good impression for Isabel's sake. I spent that afternoon ironing my best dress, a simple navy blue one I'd worn only once, to a hospital charity event. I told myself it didn't matter that I couldn't afford designer clothes. What mattered was being genuine. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. When Adrian pulled up in front of my house in a gleaming black Mercedes, I could feel his world radiating from the car itself, pristine, polished, and cold. Isabel looked stunning, and I told her so, watching her blush with joy. Adrian gave me a nod, his expression unreadable. "Ready, Serena?" he asked, his voice smooth but distant. The drive was quiet except for the hum of the engine. As the city faded into wide lawns and towering iron gates, I felt smaller and smaller. Their home wasn't just big, it was enormous, like something out of a movie. A long driveway lined with trimmed hedges led to a mansion that glowed under the sunset. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. A man in uniform opened the car door for me. Adrian barely looked at him as he tossed his keys to another attendant. Isabel held my hand, whispering, "Don't be nervous, Mom. They're just people." I smiled, even though my heart disagreed. Inside, everything sparkled: marble floors, gold frames, chandeliers that scattered light across the room. I could hear faint classical music playing somewhere in the background. It felt like stepping into another world, one where I didn't belong. Adrian's mother, Charlotte, appeared first. Elegant and poised, she was the embodiment of wealth, her diamonds subtle but unmistakable, her smile polished but cold. "You must be Serena," she said, her tone sugar-coated but stiff. "So lovely to finally meet you." "It's a pleasure, Mrs. Whitmore," I said, extending my hand. She took it lightly, her grip as brief as her smile. Dinner began with polite conversation. Charlotte asked about my work, her voice sweet but her eyes sharp. When I told her I was a nurse, she tilted her head. "That must be exhausting," she said, the pause before the word exhausting dripping with quiet judgment. "It can be," I replied calmly. "But it's fulfilling. I love helping people." "That's admirable," she said, though her expression suggested otherwise. Adrian chuckled softly, as if in agreement with his mother's unspoken thoughts. Isabel tried to keep the conversation flowing, but I could feel the tension rising with every polite smile and forced laugh. At one point, I asked casually, "And your husband, Mrs. Whitmore, will he be joining us tonight?" Her expression stiffened slightly. "He's finishing some calls in his study. He'll be down soon." I nodded, trying to ignore the way her tone hinted that his time was too important to be wasted on me. Dinner continued, each course more elaborate than the last. I found myself staring at the fine china, realizing one plate alone probably cost more than a week of my salary. Still, I kept smiling, refusing to let their subtle superiority shake me. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, confident. "Ah," Charlotte said, standing. "Here he is now." I turned, and for a brief moment, the world stopped. The man walking toward us was older now, with silver at his temples and lines etched across his face, but his eyes, those familiar blue eyes, hadn't changed. "Gregory, my Gregory." He froze mid-step, the color draining from his face as recognition struck him. I felt my breath catch, my heart hammering in my chest. "Serena?" he whispered. Charlotte's smile faltered. Adrian looked confused. Isabel glanced between us, sensing something was off. And then, from the far end of the hall, his father entered, and the moment his eyes met mine, everything stopped. His father froze mid-step, color draining from his face as if he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, no one said a word. The elegant dining room, filled with the faint sound of a violin playing through hidden speakers, seemed to hold its breath. Gregory's eyes were locked on mine, wide and uncertain, as though time itself had folded back 20 years. I felt my own pulse quicken, the past rushing back like a wave I'd thought had long receded. "Gregory?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling before I caught myself. Charlotte turned sharply, her polite hostess mask slipping just enough for me to see the confusion and perhaps the dread behind her eyes. "You two know each other?" she asked, her tone tight and careful. Gregory blinked, struggling to find his words. We went to college together," Years ago. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Adrian frowned, glancing between us. You went to college with my father? He said incredulously, as if the idea were too absurd to be true. I forced a polite smile. It's been a very long time. We haven't seen each other since. Charlotte's gaze hardened, her lips curling into a measured smile. Well, what a small world, she said softly, though her tone was anything but friendly. Shall we continue dinner? I nodded and sat back down, my appetite completely gone. Gregory joined us at the head of the table, his composure slipping every few seconds as he glanced in my direction. I kept my focus on my plate, trying not to feel the weight of his stare. As we ate, I couldn't help but notice how eerily similar Adrian was to his father, the confident posture, the piercing eyes, the air of entitlement. Only Gregory's arrogance, once sharp, had softened with age. There was something in his expression now regret, perhaps. Charlotte dominated the conversation, steering it toward topics like business acquisitions, charity galas, and political fundraisers. Every so often, Adrian would throw in a comment that made Isabel beam and made me want to cringe. So, Serena, Charlotte said at one point, her tone casual but loaded. You and Gregory were friends? Yes, I said evenly. We were close once. Gregory's fork paused midair. He cleared his throat. Serena was one of the kindest people I knew back then, he said quietly. Charlotte's eyes flickered toward him, sharp as glass. How lovely, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I felt Isabel glance at me, curiosity and confusion mixing on her face. I gave her a small, reassuring smile, hoping she'd save her questions for later. Dinner stretched on endlessly. Each word felt heavier than the last, as though everyone at that table knew there was something unsaid. Hovering between us, Gregory hardly touched his food. His gaze lingered on me every chance he got, filled with something I couldn't quite decipher, sorrow, nostalgia, or guilt. After dessert was served, Charlotte excused herself to take a call. The moment she was gone, Gregory turned to me. Serena, he said softly, could I have a word with you later? Just for a moment. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Dad? Gregory didn't answer his son. His attention was fixed entirely on me. Isabel looked uncertain, glancing between us as if trying to solve a puzzle. I hesitated before nodding. Of course. When dinner ended, Charlotte reappeared, her composure perfectly restored. Adrian offered to drive Isabel home, clearly uncomfortable with the unspoken tension. I agreed, mostly because I needed space to breathe. As they left, Gregory caught my eye and gestured subtly toward the hallway that led to a study. My heart thudded in my chest as I followed him. The house was quiet, the air heavy with memory. When we entered the study, he closed the door behind us. The walls were lined with dark wood and shelves filled with books I remembered he used to love: philosophy, poetry, history. For a moment, it was like stepping into a time capsule of the man I once knew. He turned toward me, his voice low and trembling. I can't believe it's really you, he said. After all these years. I crossed my arms, steadying myself. Life has a strange way of circling back, doesn't it? He nodded, his eyes filled with emotion. I owe you an apology, Serena. For everything. For the way I left. For the things I said, for letting my family dictate my choices. His sincerity caught me off guard, stirring emotions I thought I'd buried long ago. Before I could reply, I heard footsteps in the hall, Adrian's voice, calling out for his father. Gregory's face hardened slightly. Not here, he whispered. Not now. I stepped back, my pulse racing. I had so many questions, but the moment was slipping away. But when Gregory asked to speak to me alone after dinner, I knew the past had come knocking. In the library, the door closed behind us, and for a long moment, neither of us could speak. The silence between us was almost unbearable. The only sound came from the faint ticking of a clock on the mantel, counting seconds that felt like lifetimes. Gregory stood across from me, his shoulders slightly slumped, the confident businessman facade stripped away. For a fleeting moment, he looked like the young man I once loved, the one who used to write poetry on napkins and dream about traveling the world. He finally broke the silence. You must think I'm a coward, he said quietly, his voice rough with regret. And you'd be right. I was. I crossed my arms, feeling 1,000 memories flash behind my eyes. You left without even saying goodbye, Gregory. One day we were talking about getting an apartment together after graduation, and the next, you were gone. Married to Charlotte Whitmore. His face tightened. My father made it clear I had no choice. He threatened to cut me off, to destroy any future I had, and I was stupid enough to let fear guide me. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that you deserved better than the life I could offer at the time. I let out a bitter laugh. Better? You think vanishing without a word was better? He flinched at my tone but didn't look away. I never stopped thinking about you, Serena. Every time I saw Charlotte's face at one of those endless galas, every time I sat through another meeting I didn't care about, I thought of you. Of the life we could have had if I'd been brave. His words stung, not because they weren't sincere, but because they came far too late. I'd spent years building walls to protect myself from exactly this kind of pain. I moved on, I said firmly, though my voice trembled slightly. I had a husband, a family, and now I have Isabel. That's my life. You're part of my past. He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. I understand. But seeing you tonight, it felt like fate was giving me a chance to make things right. Especially after what I've heard from Adrian. My brows furrowed. What do you mean? He sighed deeply. My son has my worst traits magnified. I've spoiled him, Serena. I thought giving him everything would make him grateful, but it only made him entitled. He treats people like they exist to serve him. I see the way he looks at Isabel, at you, it makes me sick. I felt a flicker of shock at his honesty. He's arrogant, yes, but I didn't think you saw it. Oh, I see it, he said bitterly. Charlotte refuses to acknowledge it. She's raised him to believe our name makes him untouchable. For the first time, I saw the weary man behind the power. Gregory rubbed his temples, shaking his head. I've failed him. But maybe I can still stop him from hurting your daughter the way I hurt you. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Adrian stood there, his expression a storm of fury. What's going on here? He snapped. Gregory straightened, his calm returning instantly. Adrian, your mother was looking for you. Adrian ignored him, his glare fixed on me. You think I don't see what's happening? My fiancé's mother alone in a room with my father? How convenient. Adrian, that's enough, Gregory said sharply. But Adrian sneered. I should have known. You're exactly like every other woman who wants something from my family. Pathetic. His words sliced through me, but I didn't flinch. I'd been spoken to like that before, and I'd learned not to let it break me. Adrian, I said quietly, you may have been raised with money, but you weren't raised with manners. His face turned red with anger. You think you can talk to me like that? Leave, Gregory ordered, his tone cold and commanding. Now. Adrian's jaw tightened. He shot me a hateful look before slamming the door and storming away. I exhaled slowly, my heart pounding. Gregory's eyes softened. I'm so sorry, Serena. You didn't deserve that. None of this. I shook my head. You don't need to apologize for him. He's your son. But his choices are his own. He stepped closer, his voice low. I wish I could undo the years between us. I turned toward the door, unable to meet his gaze any longer. Some things aren't meant to be undone, Gregory. Some things just have to stay in the past. But as I walked away, my mind refused to let go of the look in his eyes, the same longing, the same regret, and for the first time in years, I felt the dangerous stir of emotions I'd sworn I'd buried forever. That night, Gregory's words echoed in my head, and I realized this reunion was about to shake all our lives. The next day, Adrian called Isabel and told her he didn't want her mother involved in the wedding anymore. When Isabel showed up at my house that afternoon, her face was pale and her hands were trembling. I was in the kitchen, folding laundry, when I heard her voice quiet, breaking call my name. Mom, can we talk? I looked up immediately, sensing something was wrong. Of course, sweetheart. What happened? She sat at the table, her eyes glistening. Adrian said, "He doesn't want you to come to any of the wedding planning meetings. He said it would be better if his family handled everything." I froze. Did he say why? She hesitated. He said, "He doesn't want you to feel out of place." I could tell from the look in her eyes that wasn't the exact wording. "Isabel," I said softly. "What did he really say?" Her voice cracked. He said, "You'd embarrass him in front of his family. That you don't fit their image." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like poison. I wanted to cry, but I refused to let my daughter see me crumble. Instead, I took a slow breath and forced a small smile. "It's okay, honey. I'm not angry." She frowned. "You should be." I told him he was being cruel. I told him if he really loved me, he'd love the people I love too. My chest ached with pride and pain. Isabel had always had a kind heart, too kind for a world like his. "What did he say?" I asked quietly. She looked down at her hands. "He said I was being dramatic, that I should be grateful his family accepted me at all." That last sentence shattered something inside me. I wanted to grab her and tell her to run, to never look back, but I also knew love doesn't break easily. Sometimes it has to fracture on its own before someone sees the truth. I don't know what to do, Mom," she whispered. "I love him, but he's changing. Or maybe he's always been like this, and I just didn't want to see it." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Just remember, this love should make you feel safe, not small." Later that evening, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected, Gregory. I hesitated before answering. "Serena," his voice came through, calm but heavy. I heard what Adrian said to Isabel. "I'm so sorry." I frowned. "How did you hear?" "I confronted him," Gregory admitted. "Charlotte told me everything. She thought it was amusing, said it was about time Adrian set boundaries. I lost my temper. I told him that respect for others, especially for you, wasn't optional." His words carried both anger and shame. "And what did he say?" I asked quietly. Gregory sighed. "He said you were nothing that his life doesn't need. People like you in it." I nearly hit him, Serena. I couldn't believe my son was capable of such cruelty. My chest tightened. "He gets that from his mother," I said softly, though I didn't mean it as an insult, more a truth shaped by years of distance. There was a pause. "Maybe," Gregory said, "but I raised him too. I have to own that." I didn't know what to say. He sounded broken, the confident man from dinner, replaced by someone who had seen the damage his choices created. "Serena," he said after a moment, his tone gentler now. "If you ever feel like Isabel's being mistreated, please tell me. I'll handle it." I smiled faintly. "That's kind, Gregory, but she's my daughter. I'll protect her." "I know," he said quietly. "You always were stronger than anyone gave you credit for." We talked for a few more minutes, mostly small talk to fill the ache left by too many years apart. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet kitchen, staring at the shadows on the wall. The irony of it all hit me. The boy who once left me for a wealthier woman was now apologizing for the son who carried his arrogance like an inheritance. A week passed before I heard from Isabel again. She seemed lighter, calmer. She told me she and Adrian were taking a break, just to clear their heads. I wanted to believe it was the beginning of her realizing what kind of man he truly was. But that night, as I sat reading in the living room, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, I froze. Gregory stood there, dressed casually but looking strangely nervous. He held something in his hands, a small bouquet of white lilies, the same kind he used to bring me in college. But when Gregory showed up at my door unannounced, everything changed. Gregory stood at my doorstep with a bouquet of white lilies, the same flowers he once brought me in college. For a moment, I couldn't move. The sight of those lilies, their fragrance, soft and nostalgic, pulled me straight back to a time when life felt simpler, before betrayal, before loss, before walls hardened around my heart. Gregory's expression was uncertain, almost boyish, as though he wasn't sure if I'd slam the door or invite him in. "Gregory," I said finally, my voice low but steady. "What are you doing here?" He cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. "I know this is unexpected, but I needed to see you. To talk." He held up the flowers slightly, almost sheepishly. "These used to be your favorite." A small, reluctant smile tugged at my lips. "You remember." "I remember everything," he said softly. I hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. "Come in." He entered my modest home like a man stepping into sacred ground slowly, respectfully, almost guiltily. I could tell he noticed the difference between his mansion and my small living room, but he didn't comment. Instead, his gaze lingered on the family photos on the wall. Isabel as a child, her high school graduation, the two of us at the beach years ago. "You raised her well," he said quietly. "She's a good woman. She had to be," I replied, folding my arms. "Life doesn't give you much choice when you're doing it alone." He nodded, the weight of that truth sinking in. "I failed you, Serena. I failed Isabel too, even if she doesn't know it. Adrian's behavior, his arrogance, that's my fault. I built that ego by giving him everything and teaching him nothing." I watched him sink onto the couch, his hands clasped tightly together. He looked tired, almost fragile, a stark contrast to the powerful businessman I'd seen at dinner. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. "Because I don't want history to repeat itself," he said earnestly. "I don't want Adrian to destroy Isabel the way I destroyed you." I took a deep breath, the confession hitting deeper than I expected. "You didn't destroy me, Gregory. You hurt me, yes, but I rebuilt myself, piece by piece." He looked up at me with genuine admiration. "And that's exactly why I came here. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. I wanted to tell you that in person." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with unspoken memories, laughter shared under campus lights, whispered promises that never came true, and the quiet ache of years lost to regret. "Finally," he said, "may I talk to Isabel? Just to make things right between her and Adrian, if possible. She deserves to hear some truths not from me as Adrian's father, but as someone who understands what it's like to love the wrong person." I hesitated. I wasn't sure if Isabel was ready for that conversation, or if I trusted Gregory's motives completely, but the sincerity in his eyes disarmed me. "Fine," I said softly. "I'll call her." An hour later, Isabel arrived, visibly surprised to see Gregory sitting in our living room. "Mr. Whitmore?" she asked cautiously. He stood, smiling gently. "Please, call me Gregory. I just wanted to talk." They sat across from each other, the tension slowly fading as he spoke honestly, humbly. He told her how much he respected the way she'd handled herself. How proud she should be for standing up to Adrian's cruelty. "You remind me of your mother," he said with a fond smile. "Strong, unyielding." Isabel's eyes softened, and for the first time in weeks, I saw her relax. She nodded, thanking him for his kindness. But just as the mood began to lighten, the sound of a car screeching outside shattered the calm. I turned toward the window just in time to see Adrian stepping out of his sleek vehicle, his jaw tight, his movements quick and furious. "Oh no," Isabel whispered. A few seconds later, there was a loud knock at the door, sharp, angry. I opened it before he could start pounding again. "Adrian," I said evenly, "you should calm down before you come inside." He ignored me, brushing past with fire in his eyes. His gaze went straight to his father. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "Why are you here with them?" "Adrian, lower your voice," Gregory said firmly. But Adrian wasn't listening. His eyes darted between me, Gregory, and Isabel, his rage barely contained. "You're defending her now? Her?" He pointed at me, his voice rising. "She's been poisoning Isabel against me. And now you're taking her side? Adrian, that's enough." Gregory's tone cracked like a whip, but his son kept going, his arrogance unraveling into something darker, panic, pride, desperation. I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm. "No one's against you, Adrian, but the way you've treated people, it can't continue. Not if you want love or respect or peace." He laughed bitterly. Spare me the moral lecture, you're just— Don't finish that sentence, Gregory interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. Adrian's mouth snapped shut, fury flashing across his face. The tension in the room was electric, every second heavier than the last. And then, Adrian showed up, furious, demanding to know why his father was defending me. Adrian burst into my home, his voice echoing with rage as he accused me of manipulating his family. The air in the room thickened instantly. Isabel flinched at the venom in Adrian's tone, and Gregory stood up, his entire posture shifting from calm father to protector. I remained where I was, my hands resting on the edge of the table, my pulse steady but cold. I had dealt with men like Adrian before, men who used anger as armor, who believed volume equaled power. Manipulating? I repeated, keeping my voice even. I haven't done anything except show your father basic kindness. He scoffed, eyes flashing. Don't pretend to be innocent. I know what this is. You're jealous of my family's success, so you're trying to wedge yourself back into my father's life. You think you can climb up by using Isabel and me as a bridge. Adrian, that's enough, Gregory snapped. Adrian turned on him, pointing a trembling finger. No, it's not enough. You've been acting strange ever since that dinner. You've been defending her, praising her like she's some saint. What is going on between you two? Gregory's jaw clenched. That's none of your concern. The hell it isn't, Adrian shouted. You're my father, and she's trying to ruin my relationship. Before Gregory could respond, Isabel rose to her feet, tears brimming in her eyes. Adrian, stop it. My mother hasn't done anything to you. She's been nothing but kind even when you were cruel to her. He turned on her, and the look in his eyes made my stomach twist. You're defending her now too? I can't believe this. You're supposed to be my fiancé, Isabel, my partner, and you're standing there taking her side? Her voice wavered, but she stood tall. I'm not taking sides. I'm just not going to let you insult my mother anymore. Something in Adrian's face cracked pride colliding with panic. His voice lowered but grew sharper, more dangerous. You know what this is, don't you? This woman, he gestured at me, has always wanted to be part of a rich family. It's pathetic. Gregory's hand slammed down on the table with a sharp crack. That's enough, he barked. The sound made Adrian flinch. You will not speak about her that way. Not in my presence. Not ever. The room went silent. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old wall clock. Adrian blinked, clearly stunned by his father's tone. You're defending her? You're actually taking her side over your own son? Gregory took a step closer, his voice low and controlled. I'm taking the side of decency, Adrian, the side of respect, something you seem to have lost. Adrian laughed bitterly. Unbelievable. You're humiliating me in front of them? This isn't about humiliation, Gregory said, his voice firm. It's about you understanding that money doesn't make you better than anyone else. I won't let you become the kind of man who destroys people because of his pride. Adrian's face twisted with anger. Too late, Dad. You already made me that man. Gregory's jaw tightened. His hand trembled slightly before he raised it, not in violence, but in warning. For a moment, I thought Adrian might push him further, but then the tension snapped. Gregory's voice broke through the air, deep and furious. Get out! Adrian froze. What? You heard me, Gregory said. Get out. Adrian's eyes darted between us, me, Isabel, and his father, and for the first time, I saw something unfamiliar there. Shame. He wanted to argue, to fight, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, he grabbed his keys from the counter, his voice trembling with rage. You'll regret this, he hissed before storming toward the door. When it slammed shut behind him, the silence that followed felt heavier than any scream. Isabel sank onto the couch, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Gregory exhaled shakily, rubbing his forehead. I'm sorry, he murmured. I never thought I'd see the day I'd speak to my son like that. I walked over and rested a hand on Isabel's shoulder. He'll come around, I said softly. He needs to face the truth about himself first. Gregory nodded, though his eyes were distant. He's been living in a bubble his whole life. I built that bubble, and now it's time he learns how to live outside it. For a few moments, none of us spoke. Isabel eventually excused herself to the kitchen to calm down, leaving Gregory and me alone again. He looked at me with quiet intensity. You know, Serena, you're the only person who's ever made me see the kind of man I should have been. I shook my head gently. It's not about who you should have been, Gregory. It's about who you still can be. He smiled faintly at that, a sad, wistful smile that told me he was still fighting his own ghosts. The calm was short-lived. My phone buzzed on the counter, and when I glanced at it, my stomach dropped. The caller ID read, Charlotte Whitmore. I hesitated, answering slowly. Hello? Her voice was cold and deliberate, every word dripping with contempt. I hope you're proud of yourself, Serena. You've managed to turn my husband against his own son. You think you've won something here, but you have no idea what you've started. I swallowed hard. Charlotte, I don't want to fight. Oh, I'm not offering one, she said sweetly. I'm promising one. But later that night, Charlotte called me, and what she said sent chills down my spine. Charlotte's voice was cold and deliberate. Stay away from my family, Serena, or I'll make sure your daughter pays the price. The words sliced through the line like a blade, each syllable dripping with venom. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Excuse me? I said, trying to keep my tone calm, though my pulse had quickened. You heard me, she said sharply. I don't know what game you're playing, showing up after all these years and turning my husband into some lovesick fool. But it ends now. You've caused enough damage, Serena. You'll stay out of our lives and out of Isabel's engagement. I tightened my grip on the phone. Charlotte, I think you're confusing kindness with manipulation. I haven't done anything to you or your family. She let out a low, bitter laugh. Please, don't play innocent with me. You've always been good at pretending to be the poor, fragile woman everyone pities. But I know who you are. I know the kind of woman who goes after men like Gregory and the kind who teaches her daughter to do the same. My heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but from fury. You can insult me all you want, Charlotte, but leave my daughter out of it. Oh, I intend to, she said smoothly. As long as you do exactly what I say, you stay away. No more dinners, no more conversations, no more showing up in my husband's thoughts. Otherwise, Isabel will find herself socially ruined. My family's influence can make or break anyone's future, and you know it. I drew in a deep breath, forcing myself not to rise to her bait. You know what the sad part is? You think that kind of power means something, but the only thing it proves is how small you really are. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. You'll regret that, she hissed, before hanging up. I stood there in my living room, the silence deafening. For a long moment, I just stared at the phone, her words replaying in my head. Isabel. My baby. I couldn't let that woman hurt her, not emotionally, not socially, not in any way. I wanted to call Gregory immediately, but something stopped me. This was his wife, his family, and I knew how quickly powerful people closed ranks when they felt cornered. I needed to think carefully. The next morning, I went to work at the hospital, trying to distract myself with my patients, but Charlotte's voice still echoed in my mind. Every time I picked up a chart or checked a pulse, her threat hovered over me like a dark cloud. Around lunchtime, I finally received a message from Gregory. Can I see you tonight? There's something I need to tell you. When he arrived that evening, he looked exhausted. His usually polished appearance was frayed, his tie loosened, his eyes shadowed. Charlotte told me what she did, he said as soon as I opened the door. She came home furious last night. She accused me of betraying her, of humiliating her in front of everyone. I crossed my arms. So, she admitted to threatening me? He nodded, jaw tight. She did. And I won't lie, it got ugly. Isabel overheard us arguing. I tried to calm Charlotte down, but she's terrified, Serena. Not of losing me, but of losing control. She built her identity on status and power. The thought of anyone cracking that illusion terrifies her. I shook my head slowly. So her solution is to destroy me? His voice softened. She's lashing out, I'll make sure she stops. I studied him for a moment. I wanted to believe him. But I'd seen too many people like Charlotte, people who smiled while plotting destruction. Gregory, I said gently. Be careful. She's not just angry. She's calculating. And I have Isabel to protect. He nodded, understanding. I know. And I promise I won't let her touch either of you. Over the next few days, the tension between their family grew. Adrian moved back into the mansion but barely spoke to his father. Isabel stopped taking his calls altogether. Rumors began spreading, whispers that Charlotte was calling off the engagement for image reasons. Isabel came to me in tears one evening, holding her phone. She's telling people I'm unstable, she said, her voice trembling, that I was never good enough for their family. I wrapped my arms around her, my heart breaking. It's not your fault, sweetheart. This is about control. You stood up to them and they hate that. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, pen and paper in hand, documenting everything, the phone call, the threats, the rumors. If Charlotte wanted a war, I'd make sure I had the truth on my side. But before I could decide my next move, fate made one for me. The following afternoon, I was halfway through my hospital shift when I looked up and froze. Standing in the hallway, wearing her designer heels and a mask of polite malice, was Charlotte Whitmore herself. Her eyes found mine instantly, and her smile was the kind that promised trouble. And then, Charlotte made a move I never expected. She showed up at my workplace. She walked into the hospital in designer heels, her eyes sharp with hatred. There she was, Charlotte Whitmore, immaculate as ever, gliding through the hospital corridor like she owned it. Heads turned as she passed, nurses exchanged curious glances, and patients gawked at the woman who clearly didn't belong in a place where people wore scrubs instead of silk. I stood frozen near the nurses' station, my heart pounding as her eyes locked on mine. "Serena?" she said sweetly, her red lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I thought I'd drop by. I wanted to see where you work." I could feel the judgment dripping from every syllable. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said evenly, keeping my professional tone. "This isn't really an appropriate place for personal visits." "Oh, I won't take much of your time," she said, her voice loud enough for nearby staff to hear. "I just wanted to see what it's like to work in such humble conditions. It must be exhausting, all these long hours for so little reward." My jaw tightened, but I stayed calm. "We don't do it for rewards, we do it because we care." Charlotte tilted her head, pretending to ponder that. "How noble. I suppose some people are meant to serve while others lead. The world needs both, doesn't it?" A few of my coworkers stopped what they were doing. Sensing the tension, I wanted to end it quickly before she caused a scene. "If you'll excuse me, I have patients to check on." But Charlotte stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound intimate, though every word was meant to cut. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you've turned my husband into your knight in shining armor. But this little fairy tale of yours, it ends now." I met her gaze steadily. "This isn't a fairy tale, Charlotte. It's real life. And in real life, no one's impressed by cruelty." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then she chuckled, a brittle sound. "You always did have a sharp tongue. It's what made Gregory notice you in the first place. Poor thing, you must have thought you were special back then, too." The jab stung, but I refused to let her see it. "You're right," I said softly. "I was special to him. And from the look on his face every time he talks about you, I still am." Her eyes narrowed, the mask slipping for a heartbeat before she composed herself. "Enjoy your moment, Serena. Because it won't last." Before I could respond, a familiar voice broke through the tense air. "Charlotte." We both turned. Gregory stood at the end of the hallway, his expression unreadable but his presence commanding. He walked toward us, every step echoing with authority. "What are you doing here?" Charlotte straightened, her confidence faltering. "I came to talk to Serena," I thought. He cut her off sharply. "No, you came to humiliate her." Gasps whispered among the nurses. Charlotte's cheeks flushed crimson. "Gregory, don't you dare embarrass me in front of these people." "Oh, you've managed that yourself," he said coolly. You've threatened her, slandered her daughter, and now you're stalking her at her job? This ends now. Charlotte's voice trembled with fury. You're defending her again? In public? Yes, he said simply. Because she's done nothing wrong. You, on the other hand, have crossed every line of decency. Her eyes filled with tears not of pain, but humiliation. You'll regret this, she whispered. You'll regret throwing away everything we built for her. Gregory's voice softened, though his tone stayed firm. Charlotte? We didn't build anything. We just played a part in your performance of perfection. She glared at him for a long, seething moment before turning to me. I hope you're proud of yourself, she spat. You've ruined a family. I took a step forward, my voice steady. No, Charlotte. I've just stopped pretending yours was perfect. She let out a trembling breath, spun on her heel, and stormed down the corridor. The echo of her heels faded, leaving behind a stunned silence. Gregory exhaled, rubbing his temple. I'm sorry you had to go through that. She's unraveling. I nodded slowly. She's angry because she's losing control. But this showing up here, this was desperate. He looked at me with weary eyes. I think she knows it's over, she just doesn't want to admit it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything, the past, the conflict, the heartbreak hung between us. Then he smiled faintly. You handled that with more grace than anyone I've ever known. Grace, I said quietly, glancing down the hallway where Charlotte had disappeared. That's all I have left, Gregory. If I lose that, she wins. He reached out, brushing his fingers lightly against my arm, a gesture filled with quiet gratitude. You haven't lost anything, Serena. If anything, you're reminding me what strength really looks like. Just then, my phone buzzed. I looked down, expecting another hospital alert, but it was Isabel. The message on the screen made my stomach drop. Mom, I need you. Please call me. It's urgent. I met Gregory's worried eyes. It's Isabel, I whispered. Something's wrong. But when Isabel called crying that night, I knew the story wasn't over yet. Isabel sobbed through the phone, saying Adrian had broken off the engagement. The sound of her voice shattered me. My daughter, my brave, beautiful Isabel, was crying so hard I could barely understand her words. He said it's over, Mom. She gasped between sobs. He said he can't do this anymore. That I'm an embarrassment. I felt my knees weaken. I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed, clutching the phone tightly. Sweetheart, calm down, I said softly. Tell me what happened. Her breath hitched. He came by the apartment. He was furious. He said I've made his family look bad, that everyone's talking about his father defending you at the hospital. He said he's tired of the drama and that he deserves someone who fits into his world. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I held my voice steady. You didn't do anything wrong, Isabel. Not one thing. This isn't about you, it's about his pride. He looked at me like I was a stranger. She whispered. Like all those months together meant nothing. I'm coming over, I said immediately. Within the hour, I was at her apartment. She was curled up on the couch, clutching a pillow, her eyes red and swollen. I sat beside her and pulled her close, letting her cry until the worst of it passed. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small, exhausted. I thought he loved me, Mom. I thought he was my future. I brushed her hair back gently. Love doesn't look like that, honey. It doesn't belittle or demand or make you question your worth. It doesn't tear you down to make itself taller. She let out a shaky sigh. I guess I didn't want to believe what I saw. Every time he made a cruel comment, I told myself he didn't mean it. You saw the good in him, I said softly. That's not weakness. But you can't fix someone who refuses to see what they've become. She nodded weakly, wiping her eyes. Do you think he'll come back? I hesitated. Maybe, I said honestly. But even if he does, that doesn't mean you should take him back. A silence fell between us, thick with the weight of realization. Then Isabel whispered. Gregory called me today. That caught me off guard. He did? She nodded. He said he was sorry, that that he never wanted it to get this bad. He told me he was proud of me for standing my ground. I exhaled slowly. That sounds like something he'd say. He also said, Isabel added softly, that he and Mrs. Whitmore aren't living together anymore. I blinked. He told you that? Yes. He said she's been staying at a hotel since their argument. He said he's done pretending everything's fine. A mixture of shock and empathy swirled inside me. Gregory was finally taking a stand, maybe for the first time in his life. But part of me couldn't help wondering what that would mean for him, and for me. Later that night, I stayed at Isabel's apartment. I made tea while she took a long shower, and when she came out wrapped in a blanket, her eyes looked clearer, steadier. I think I just need to focus on myself for a while, she said quietly. I smiled. That's the best thing you could do. She gave me a small, tired smile. I don't know what I'd do without you. I squeezed her hand. You'll never have to find out. A few days later, Gregory stopped by my house unexpectedly. When I opened the door, he looked different, lighter somehow, like a man who'd finally made peace with a hard decision. She told me she's filing for separation, he said simply. Charlotte, she can't handle me embarrassing her anymore. Truth is, I think she's been waiting for an excuse to leave. I studied him quietly. And you? How do you feel? He smiled faintly. Free. Sad, yes, but free. He paused. And I wanted to thank you. You didn't ask for any of this, yet somehow you reminded me who I really am. I didn't know what to say. The way he looked at me with that mix of gratitude and tenderness stirred something I hadn't felt in years. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. Isabel's name flashed on the screen. I answered, expecting a small update about her day, but her voice trembled. Mom, he's here. My stomach dropped. Who? Adrian? She whispered. He showed up at my door. My grip on the phone tightened. Isabel. Don't let him in. I'll be there in 10 minutes. But before she could respond, I heard another voice in the background, low, shaky, desperate. Please, Isabel. I just need to talk. But one evening, Adrian showed up at my door, and this time, he wasn't mocking me. Adrian stood there, eyes red and voice trembling, a shadow of the proud man he once was. When I arrived at Isabel's apartment, I could already see him standing outside her door through the hallway window. The man who once strutted around like the world belonged to him now looked hollow. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his hands shaking slightly as he rubbed them together. Isabel stood in the doorway, torn between anger and compassion. I parked my car and hurried up the steps. The moment Adrian saw me, his eyes dropped to the floor like a scolded child. Mrs. Hayes, he murmured. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see. You're right about that, I said firmly, though not unkindly. What are you doing here, Adrian? He swallowed hard. I came to apologize, to both of you. Isabel's arms were crossed tightly over her chest, her voice sharp. It's a little late for that. I know, he said quickly. But I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Everything's fallen apart, my parents, my reputation, my pride. I thought I had everything under control, but I was wrong. I studied him quietly. There was no arrogance left, only guilt. What changed? I asked. He hesitated, then let out a trembling breath. My father told me the truth about you, about the two of you, about how he treated you when he was my age. He said you were the only woman who ever made him feel human. He said I reminded him of the worst version of himself. His voice cracked on that last line, and for the first time, I saw the broken boy beneath the polished exterior. Isabel's anger softened slightly, though she didn't move closer. So you finally realized how cruel you were? She asked quietly. He nodded. Yes, and I hate myself for it. I thought money and image made me important. I thought that's what love was, controlling everything so I'd never feel small. But you showed me, both of you, that I was wrong. I exchanged a glance with Isabel. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to protect her from another round of heartbreak. But another part, the part that had seen how pain could change a person, hesitated. Adrian, I said gently. Apologies don't erase what's been said or done. You hurt my daughter deeply. You humiliated me. Words like that don't fade easily. He nodded quickly, eyes wet. I know. And I'm not asking for forgiveness, not yet. I just needed to say it. To face what I've done instead of running from it. Isabel sighed softly and stepped aside. Come in. You can talk, but that's it. He entered cautiously, like a man afraid to breathe too loudly. Gregory arrived not long after, having learned from Isabel that Adrian had come by. When he stepped into the apartment, the air shifted again, father and son, standing face to face, the distance between them heavy with everything unspoken. Adrian's voice was small. Dad, I'm sorry. For all of it. Gregory's expression softened, but there was sorrow in his eyes. You've hurt people, son. People who did nothing but show you grace. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Gregory looked at me, then at Isabel. Redemption doesn't come from words, Adrian. It comes from actions. If you want to make things right, start by learning how to respect others without expecting anything in return. Adrian nodded, his shoulders shaking slightly. I'll try. I promise. For the first time in months, the anger in the room seemed to fade, replaced by a heavy kind of peace. Isabel offered him a cup of tea, and though her hands trembled, she handed it to him. He accepted it with quiet gratitude. I don't expect us to go back to how things were, Isabel said softly. But I hope we can both learn something from this. Adrian gave a small, broken smile. You already have. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. After a long, emotional conversation, he finally left, leaving behind a silence that felt oddly calm. Gregory sat down beside me, exhaling deeply. Maybe there's hope for him yet, he said. Maybe, I replied quietly. Sometimes hitting the ground is the only way a man learns how to stand. He looked at me with that same warmth I remembered from years ago, the kind that reached his eyes. You always knew how to see the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. I smiled faintly. It's not about seeing the best in them, Gregory. It's about refusing to let their worst define me. He reached over and took my hand, a simple gesture, but it made my chest tighten. Serena, he said softly, I need to tell you something. I met his gaze, curious but wary. What is it? He hesitated, his thumb brushing lightly over my fingers. Something I should have said 20 years ago. And then Gregory said something that left me completely speechless. He looked at me with teary eyes and said, Serena, I never stopped loving you and I don't want to waste any more time. The words hung between us, fragile and impossible. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard him. But the way Gregory's voice trembled, the way his gaze searched, mine like a man desperate for forgiveness, told me he meant every word. I froze, my mind spinning. Gregory, I whispered, barely breathing his name. He exhaled shakily, as if releasing years of pent-up emotion. I spent decades convincing myself I'd made the right choice, that I chose stability, family, legacy. But the truth is, I chose fear. I chose a life that looked good on paper but felt empty inside. You were the only person who ever made me feel like I could be more than just a Whitmore. I wanted to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. Memories surged, our laughter under college lights, the night he promised we'd conquer the world together, the heartbreak when he vanished without a goodbye. Part of me wanted to believe him, to let those old feelings surface. The other part screamed to protect the heart that had learned too well what disappointment felt like. I took a deep breath. Gregory, a lot has happened since then. We're not the same people we were back in college. I'm not that girl anymore. I know, he said softly. And that's what makes this real. I don't love a memory, Serena. I love the woman standing in front of me, the one who raised an incredible daughter, who held her dignity through everything life threw at her. You've spent years being the strong one. Let someone else be strong for you now. My eyes stung with tears I hadn't expected. I don't know if I can trust this. You're still married, Gregory. Even if you're separated. It's complicated. He nodded, understanding. You're right. It's messy. But I'm not asking for anything right now, no promises, no declarations. I just wanted you to know the truth before it's too late. I looked down at our joined hands, his fingers rougher now, older, but still familiar. You always had perfect timing, I said with a faint, watery smile, just a few decades late. He chuckled softly, the sound warm and wistful. I suppose I did. That night, after he left, I sat by the window long after midnight, thinking about everything. Outside, the world was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heart too loudly. I thought about the way he'd looked at me, not with guilt anymore, but with hope. Real hope. It scared me, but it also stirred something I hadn't felt in a long time. The next few weeks passed slowly, gently. Isabel began to heal. She started volunteering at the hospital, saying it helped her feel useful again. Adrian moved out of town for work, sending a handwritten apology letter to both of us. I didn't know if it was sincere, but it was a start. Gregory, meanwhile, began to build a new life of his own. He sold the mansion, yes, the mansion that had been the symbol of all his power and pride. It never felt like home, he told me one evening as we walked through the park. Not like this does. I laughed softly. A public park feels more like home than a mansion? He smiled. Because I'm walking beside the person who made me feel human again. It was slow, cautious, tender, but something was rebuilding between us. Not the reckless passion of youth, but something steadier. Something real. Charlotte eventually filed for divorce. She moved abroad, sending Gregory a brief, cold letter that ended with, "Do whatever you want. You always were better at pretending than loving." He showed it to me once, then tore it in half and threw it away without a word. For the first time in years, Gregory seemed free and at peace. Isabel, too, was smiling again. One evening, as the three of us shared dinner, she looked between us with a mischievous grin. You know, if someone told me a year ago my mom and my ex-fiancé's father would end up like this, I'd have laughed. I chuckled, shaking my head. Life has a sense of humor. She squeezed my hand. As long as you're happy, Mom, that's all I care about. Gregory glanced at me with a soft smile that made my heart flutter. I think we're all learning what happiness actually looks like. For the first time in decades, I felt content not because life was perfect, but because I was finally surrounded by truth. No more masks, no more lies. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that one last chapter was waiting, something unexpected that would bring our journey full circle. But the biggest surprise was yet to come, one that would heal every wound for good. A year later, I stood at my daughter's wedding, not to Adrian, but to a man who truly respected her. The sun was setting over the garden, bathing everything in golden light. Isabel stood beneath an archway of white roses, her eyes shining brighter than the fairy lights strung through the trees. Her fiancé, now husband, was Daniel, a kind-hearted paramedic she'd met while volunteering at the hospital. From the moment I saw the way he looked at her, I knew she'd finally found what she'd been searching for. Love that didn't come with conditions, pride, or cruelty. As the music swelled and the guests clapped, my heart swelled with a mix of pride and peace. Isabel had survived heartbreak and humiliation, yet here she was radiant, calm, and whole. She had chosen herself before choosing anyone else, and because of that, she'd found someone who truly saw her worth. I watched her and Daniel exchange vows, their voices trembling with emotion. When the minister finally said, "You may kiss the bride," I felt a tear slip down my cheek, not of sadness, but relief. My daughter was free from the shadows of the Whitmore family's arrogance, free to live without fear of judgment or shame. As the applause filled the air, I felt a gentle hand touch mine. I turned and saw Gregory, standing beside me in a simple gray suit, his smile warm and quiet. No longer the polished CEO, no longer the man bound by his family expectations, just Gregory, the man I'd known all those years ago. "She's beautiful," he said softly. "She is," I whispered, my eyes never leaving Isabel. "And strong." He nodded. "She gets that from her mother." I smiled at that, shaking my head lightly. "She gets her stubbornness from me. Her kindness, though, that's all her." He chuckled, squeezing my hand gently. "You really did raise an extraordinary woman, Serena. You should be proud." "I am," I said, my throat tightening. "More than words can say." The reception began as twilight fell, laughter mingling with music and the clinking of glasses. Guests danced under the stars, and for the first time in years, I felt surrounded by genuine joy, not the kind bought by wealth, but born from real connection. Gregory stayed close, helping with small things, carrying chairs, refilling drinks. He wasn't acting like a man who had once lived in a mansion. He was just happy to belong. Every so often, I caught him watching me with a soft expression that made my heart ache and heal at the same time. During dinner, Isabel stood and raised a glass. "I want to thank the person who's always been my anchor," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "My mother. Mom, you've been my strength through every storm. You taught me what love should look like and that it's okay to walk away from people who make you feel small. I wouldn't be standing here today without you." The applause was warm, genuine, and I had to blink back tears as I stood to hug her. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," I whispered. Afterward, as the night deepened, Gregory and I found ourselves standing on the edge of the dance floor, watching Isabel and Daniel share their first dance. The song playing was soft, romantic one I remembered from decades ago, a melody that made my chest tighten. Gregory smiled faintly. "Do you remember this song?" I nodded slowly. "You played it for me, the night before you left for your father's estate. I never forgot." He took a deep breath and extended his hand. "Then dance with me, Serena. For old time's sake and for new beginnings." I hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. The world seemed to fade as he pulled me close, our steps slow and sure. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Everything we'd endured, the pain, the loss, the rediscovery had led us to this quiet moment of peace. As the song ended, he whispered, "You know, I used to think calling you my greatest regret was poetic. But now I realize you were never a regret at all. You were the lesson I needed to learn." I smiled through my tears. And what lesson was that? That love built on respect and honesty doesn't fade, not with time, not with distance. The night continued with laughter and warmth. Adrian even appeared later, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. He didn't approach, but when Isabel noticed him, she gave a small nod, a silent sign of forgiveness. He smiled faintly before leaving. A man finally humbled. Finally human. Charlotte didn't attend, but a letter arrived weeks earlier, written in her precise, elegant handwriting. In it, she admitted her mistakes, her cruelty, her pride, and wished Isabel happiness. I didn't know if the words were genuine, but I decided to believe they were. Some wounds heal only through letting go. When the evening ended and the guests began to leave, I stood watching my daughter dance barefoot on the grass, her laughter echoing under the stars. Gregory slipped an arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of something I thought I'd lost forever: peace, love, and belonging. And as I watched Isabel dance, I smiled, knowing that no one could ever call me a nobody again.